The Mercedes S-Class hit the guardrail at 70 kilometers per hour. Metal screamed against concrete as the luxury sedan flipped twice before landing upside down in the shallow drainage ditch beside I-Corridor Road. Steam hissed from the crumpled engine as petrol dripped onto the muddy ground. "Hey, stick with me till the very end. You won't believe what happened next, and I promise it's worth every second. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to our growth. Let's go." Adani was returning from Mushin Market when she heard the crash. The 42-year-old widow set down her basin of herbs and rushed toward the smoking wreckage. Other passers-by gathered, some recording with their phones, others simply staring. "Someone is inside," she shouted, but nobody moved to help. She crawled through the shattered passenger window, cutting her arms on broken glass. The driver was unconscious, blood trickling from his forehead. His expensive suit was torn, and his Rolex gleamed incongruously in the dim light filtering through the wreckage. Adani checked his pulse, steady but weak. With strength born of desperation, she dragged the stranger from the twisted metal. As sirens wailed in the distance, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of waiting for the ambulance that might never come, she flagged down a small bus and took him to Mama, the traditional healer in her neighborhood. She never looked back at the luxury car or the briefcase full of documents that would have revealed his identity. Chief Emeka Okafor, CEO of Okafor Industries. Last seen leaving 6 office Tuesday evening. $50 million reward for information leading to his safe return. The posters appeared overnight across all areas in Lagos. Private investigators combed through CCTV footage while police divers searched the lagoon. His business empire, worth over $500 billion, teetered on the edge of chaos without its ruthless leader. In his glass penthouse overlooking the Atlantic, Emeka's estranged daughter Kemi stared at the missing person flyer. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since she'd accused him of caring more about profit margins than people's lives. His ex-wife had already moved on, living in London with her new British husband. The only person genuinely worried was his elderly housekeeper, who kept preparing his favorite pepper soup each evening. His business partners gathered in emergency sessions. Contracts worth billions hung in the balance. Without Emeka's signature, the biggest oil deal in Nigerian history would collapse within a week. His rivals circled like vultures, ready to pick apart his empire piece by piece. But in a small room behind a traditional medicine shop in Mushin, the man they were desperately seeking lay unconscious on a mat, his designer clothes replaced with simple cotton wrapper, his multi-billion naira empire forgotten like a half-remembered dream. Adani lived in a face-me-I-face-you compound where 20 families shared 2 bathrooms and everyone knew everyone's business. Her single room served as bedroom, kitchen, and storage for the herbs she sold at Mushin Market. On the walls hung photos of her late husband Tund and certificates from her secondary school years before marriage changed her trajectory. Each morning at 5, she prepared herbal mixture for various ailments before heading to the market. Her customers trusted her knowledge of traditional medicine passed down from her grandmother. She earned barely enough to feed herself and her aging mother, but she shared what little she had with neighbors. Her compound was alive with community. Children played football in the narrow courtyard while mothers braided hair and gossiped. Old men played draft under the single electric bulb, arguing loudly about Arsenal versus Chelsea. When someone fell sick, everyone contributed money for medicine. When a child needed school fees, the community rallied together. This was the world Chief Emeka Okafor had never known, one where wealth was measured in relationships, not bank statements. Where respect came from character, not possessions. Where no one slept hungry if their neighbor had food to share. After 3 days of tending to the stranger she'd saved, Adani watched him finally open his eyes. When he couldn't remember his name, she decided to call him John. A simple name for what she hoped would be a simple recovery. "Who am I?" were the first words he spoke. Adani sat beside the thin mattress where he'd lain for 3 days, spooning pepper soup into his mouth. The traditional healer, Mama, had cleaned his wounds with bitter leaf and palm wine, chanting prayers to ensure the spirits didn't claim his soul during his journey back to consciousness. "I don't know," Adani answered honestly. "You were in a car accident. No identification, no wallet. I call you John." He touched his bandaged head gingerly. Everything was blank, no memory of family, work, or even his own face. But something felt wrong about his hands. They were too soft, unmarked by honest labor. His accent, though he spoke fluently, carried undertones of expensive education. "Where am I?" he asked, looking around the small, crowded room filled with herbs hanging from the ceiling. "Mushin, my neighborhood." She helped him sit up slowly. "You're safe here." Over the following days, John tried to piece together fragments of his identity. He knew he could read and write. Numbers came easily to him. He could calculate percentages and interest rates instinctively. But personal memories remained locked away. Adani watched him carefully. Despite his confusion, he possessed a natural authority, an unconscious expectation that people would listen when he spoke. She wondered who he really was and why no one had come looking for him. John's strength returned gradually, but his memory remained stubbornly blank. Adani insisted he stay until he was fully recovered. Her small room now felt cramped with 2 adults, but she couldn't bring herself to turn him away. He began helping with her herbal medicine business, initially just carrying baskets to the market. But soon his suggestions transformed her tiny operation. He reorganized her inventory system, identified her most profitable remedies, and convinced her to expand into neighboring markets. "Why do you sell Agbo for just 200 when women travel from Alaba market to buy it? They would pay 400 conveniently," he reasoned, his business instincts emerging naturally despite his amnesia. "Because my neighbors cannot afford 400, Adani replied, but she listened to his advice about targeting customers with more disposable income. Within 2 weeks, her daily earnings doubled. John negotiated better prices for raw materials and suggested packaging innovations using recycled bottles with handwritten labels. His mind seemed naturally attuned to profit margins and market dynamics. At night, they would sit in the compound courtyard sharing stories, she about her late husband and dreams deferred, he about the strange fragments that flickered through his consciousness like half-remembered movie scenes. Luxury cars, boardroom meetings, a young woman crying in his office. Their hands touched one evening while counting the day's earnings, and neither pulled away. Love crept up on them slowly, like dawn breaking over Lagos Lagoon. John fit seamlessly into compound life. He helped elderly Mama Sul carry water up 2 flights of stairs. He mediated disputes between neighbors with diplomatic skill that seemed second nature. Children gravitated toward him, sensing his genuine interest in their schoolwork and dreams. Adani found herself looking forward to their evening conversations. John possessed a curious mind, asking thoughtful questions about her herbal knowledge and listening intently to her explanations. Unlike her late husband, who dismissed her traditional medicine as village nonsense, John respected her expertise. "You have a gift," he told her one evening as they sorted dried herbs by lamplight. "The way you understand which combinations will heal. It's like you see patterns others miss." Their fingers intertwined naturally now. Adani hadn't touched a man since Tun's death 4 years ago, but with John, physical closeness felt right. He kissed her gently one night after she'd successfully treated a neighbor's child for malaria using only herbal remedies. The compound residents began calling them husband and wife with approving smiles. Mama Kemi, the compound elder, pulled Adani aside to offer marriage advice. "That man loves you with his whole heart. I see how he looks at you." But sometimes Adani caught John staring into space with troubled expression, as if trying to remember something important just beyond his grasp. The memories returned in pieces, triggered by unexpected moments. The smell of expensive cologne from a passing businessman made John dizzy with recognition. The sound of helicopter blades overhead sent sharp pain through his skull. When they passed a construction site, he found himself calculating structural loads and safety margins with concerning expertise. "I think I was in construction," he told Adunni one evening. But the fragments were darker than simple professional knowledge. He remembered shouting at someone in an air-conditioned office. A woman begging him to reconsider a decision. Maps spread across conference tables showing land acquisitions. Environmental impact reports marked confidential. The dreams were worse. He saw himself signing documents while people in the background wept. Communities displaced. Forests cleared. Rivers turned black with industrial waste. In these nightmares, he was always wearing expensive suits and felt nothing but satisfaction at rising profit margins. "These dreams, they feel like memories," he confessed to Adunni. "What if I was a terrible person before the accident?" She held his face gently. "Whatever you were before doesn't matter. I know who you are now, kind, generous, hardworking. You help my neighbors without expecting anything in return. You treat me with respect and love. This is your true self." But John couldn't shake the feeling that he was living borrowed time, that his real life was searching for him. John's natural business acumen became impossible to ignore. He suggested Adunni register her herbal medicine business formally, helped her navigate bureaucratic requirements, and secured a small loan to expand inventory. Within a month, she'd moved from selling at one market stall to supplying 3 different locations. "How do you know all this?" she asked after he'd expertly negotiated a bulk purchase contract with herb suppliers from Abaddon. "I don't know," he replied honestly. "The knowledge just appears when I need it." He possessed instinctive understanding of supply chains, profit margins, and market positioning that came from years of high-level business experience. But he also showed concern for ethical practices that felt new, as if his moral compass had been recalibrated by his time in the compound. When suppliers tried to cheat on weights and measures, John's negotiation tactics were so sophisticated that Adunni wondered if he'd been a lawyer or accountant. When the local government official demanded bribes for business permits, John found legal workarounds that protected smaller vendors from exploitation. The other market traders began consulting him for business advice. His reputation grew. The mysterious man who'd appeared from nowhere and transformed Adunni's herb business into a thriving enterprise. But success brought unwanted attention. Government officials noticed increased tax revenues from the market. Business associations requested meetings with this innovative trader who seemed to understand commerce better than their university-educated consultants. John preferred to stay in the background, sensing that visibility might bring consequences he wasn't prepared to face. Private investigator David Okoro stood in the police station staring at accident reports from 6 weeks ago. Chief Emeka Okafor had vanished without trace, but his Mercedes S-Class had been found stripped clean by area boys within hours of the crash. No witnesses came forward. No surveillance cameras captured the scene. "Someone survived that crash," David muttered, studying photos of the mangled vehicle. "The blood patterns show he was pulled out alive." Okafor Industries' board of directors had hired 3 different investigative firms. The company's stock price had dropped 30%. International partners were threatening to cancel contracts. The Nigerian Stock Exchange had suspended trading in Okafor shares pending resolution of the CEO's status. Meanwhile, Emeka's business empire was slowly fracturing. Without his decisive leadership and signature authority, middle managers made contradictory decisions. His personal assistant fielded dozens of calls daily from confused subordinates who'd never made independent decisions during his iron-fisted reign. The reward money had increased to 100 million, but credible leads remained scarce. Some claimed to have seen him boarding flights to London or Dubai. Others insisted he was hiding in a monastery, recovering from a nervous breakdown. Conspiracy theories flourished on social media: kidnapping, corporate sabotage, voluntary disappearance to avoid corruption charges. In Mushin Market, Vendors gossiped about the missing billionaire while selling vegetables to a quiet man named John, who helped the herb seller expand her business. None connected the soft-spoken stranger to the ruthless CEO whose photograph appeared daily in newspapers. 3 months after the accident, John and Adunni had settled into comfortable domesticity. He'd moved his sleeping mat closer to hers, and compound residents had stopped pretending they weren't sharing a room. Mama Kemi suggested they make their union official with a small traditional ceremony. Their relationship deepened beyond physical attraction. John helped Adunni care for her aging mother, patiently feeding the elderly woman when arthritis made eating difficult. He learned to prepare herbal remedies under Adunni's guidance, showing genuine interest in traditional medicine knowledge passed down through generations. "My grandmother would have liked you," Adunni said one evening as they worked together preparing medicine for a neighbor's sick child. "She always said the best healers have patient hearts." John found purpose in their shared work that felt more meaningful than the half-remembered business dealings haunting his dreams. When their herbal treatments successfully cured ailments that modern medicine had failed to address, he felt satisfaction deeper than any profit margin. They made love for the first time on a night when rain drummed against their tin roof. Afterwards, as they held each other in the small room scented with dried herbs, Adunni whispered, "Whatever your name was before, you're my John now." But even in moments of perfect happiness, John felt shadow of his forgotten past lurking at the edges of consciousness. Sometimes he would catch himself calculating complex financial projections or remembering fragments of boardroom strategies that seemed foreign to his current peaceful existence. John's dreams were becoming more vivid and disturbing. He saw himself approving projects that poisoned rivers and displaced communities. In one recurring nightmare, he stood in a glass office overlooking environmental destruction, feeling only satisfaction at quarterly profit reports. During waking hours, he'd developed strong opinions about environmental protection that seemed to contradict his dream memories. When Adunni showed him areas where industrial waste had contaminated local water sources, John felt visceral anger that surprised him with its intensity. "Companies that do this should be prosecuted," he said, staring at oil-slicked water near Mushin Creek. "They destroy people's livelihoods for profit." Adunni studied his face carefully. "You sound like you have personal experience with such companies." "I don't know why I feel so strongly about it," he admitted. "But seeing this makes me angry in a way I can't explain." He began researching environmental law at a nearby internet cafe, staying up late reading about corporate accountability and environmental justice. His research skills were sophisticated. He navigated complex legal documents and financial reports with expertise that suggested extensive business education. When he presented Adunni with a detailed analysis of which companies were responsible for local pollution, she was amazed by his thoroughness. "You could have been a lawyer or activist before your accident," she suggested. But the knowledge felt darker than advocacy, like insider understanding of how environmental crimes were committed and concealed. Emeka Okafor stared at her father's empty office chair, surrounded by stacks of unsigned contracts and unanswered correspondence. As his only child, she'd inherited temporary authority over Okafor Industries, but the company was hemorrhaging money and talent. "We need to declare him legally dead and transition leadership," advised the company's head lawyer. "The board won't wait much longer." Kemi wasn't ready to give up hope, despite their complicated relationship. She despised her father's ruthless business practices, but she remembered moments of gentleness from her childhood before money and power had hardened him completely. She decided to visit his penthouse apartment for the first time in years, searching for clues investigators might have missed. The space was sterile and impersonal, expensive furniture arranged for show, no family photographs, no personal touches that revealed the man behind the billionaire facade. In his study, she found environmental impact reports stamped, approved, despite documenting severe ecological damage. Community displacement documents bore his signature next to photographs of families forced from their ancestral lands. The cruelty was systematic, documented in neat filing cabinets like any other business expense. Among the papers, she discovered correspondence with Aduni's late husband Tunde Adesanya, a small businessman whose transport company had been destroyed when Okafor Industries acquired his depot land for oil storage. Tunde had begged for fair compensation, threatening legal action that never materialized before his death from hypertension. Kemi sat in her father's leather chair, finally understanding why he'd isolated himself from everyone who'd once loved him. The breakthrough came suddenly and violently. John was helping Aduni negotiate a large herb order when the buyer mentioned his company name. Okafor Industries supplies our Lagos offices. The name hit John like physical blow. Images flooded back. Board meetings, acquisition documents, environmental impact reports, quarterly profit celebrations. He remembered his corner office overlooking Lagos Lagoon, his fleet of luxury cars, his reputation as the most ruthless businessman in West Africa. He excused himself and stumbled outside, vomiting behind the market stall as memories crashed over him in waves. Chief Emeka Okafor, oil mogul, billionaire, a man who'd destroyed communities and lives in pursuit of ever-increasing profits. "John, what's wrong?" Aduni followed him, concerned. He couldn't speak. The contrast was too jarring, the gentle, loving man he'd become versus the heartless corporate predator he remembered being. He saw himself signing the documents that had displaced the fishing village where Aduni's cousin lived. He remembered approving the oil drilling that had poisoned the water sources her community depended on for survival. But the cruelest memory was yet to surface. As he stared at Aduni's worried face, he remembered her late husband's name, Tunde Adesanya, the small businessman whose transport company Okafor Industries had destroyed through legal manipulation and political connections. The woman who'd saved his life was the widow of a man he'd driven to an early grave through stress and financial ruin. John ran from the market, leaving Aduni calling his name behind him. John Emeka wandered Lagos streets for hours, his recovered memories warring with 4 months of life as a better man. He remembered every detail now. His penthouse overlooking the lagoon, his collection of luxury cars, his reputation for closing deals regardless of human cost. The irony was devastating. Aduni had nursed him back to health with herbs from forests his company had destroyed. She'd shared her bed with the man responsible for her husband's death. She'd fallen in love with her greatest enemy, and he'd found happiness while living a lie. He returned to the compound late that night to find Aduni waiting, worry etched across her face. "Where did you go?" "I've been searching everywhere." Looking at her, he saw not just the woman he'd grown to love, but the victim of his former cruelty. Her calloused hands had worked extra shifts to pay medical bills after Tunde's heart attack. Her small room was all she could afford after Okafor Industries lawyers had seized their family land through fraudulent documents. "I remember who I am," he said quietly. Relief flooded her expression. "That's wonderful. Tell me everything, your real name, your family, where you come from." "My name is Emeka Okafor." The name meant nothing to her initially. Then recognition dawned slowly, horror replacing joy as she understood the implications. The missing billionaire. The man from the posters. She backed away from him. "No, not you." "I'm sorry, Aduni. I'm so sorry for everything." But she was already gathering his few possessions, throwing them into a plastic bag with shaking hands. "Get out," she whispered, then screamed, "Get out of my home." Emeka's security team found him 3 days later, sleeping rough near Tafua Balewa Square. Private investigator David Okoro had tracked him through market vendor interviews, following the trail of the mysterious John, who'd been helping the herb seller. "Sir, thank God you're alive." His head of security, Musa, actually shed tears of relief. "The whole company has been searching for you." They whisked him to a private medical facility for evaluation. Physically, he was healthier than before the accident. Months of manual labor and simple food had improved his fitness. Mentally, The doctors confirmed complete memory recovery with no apparent cognitive damage. But Emeka felt like he was returning to a foreign country. His penthouse apartment seemed sterile and cold after Aduni's warm compound community. His closet full of expensive suits felt like costumes for a play he no longer wanted to perform. "Sir, we need you to sign these contracts immediately," his assistant said, presenting documents worth billions of naira. "The Chevron partnership expires tomorrow without your signature." Emeka stared at the papers, remembering how signing similar documents had once given him satisfaction. Now he saw them as instruments of destruction, each signature authorizing further environmental damage and community displacement. "Not today," he said. "Sir, with respect, we can't wait. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. If you don't sign tonight, Okafor Industries loses the biggest oil contract in our company's history." Emeka walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Lagoon. Somewhere across the sprawling city, Aduni was preparing herbs for tomorrow's market, hating him with justified anger. The man he'd been would have signed the contracts without hesitation. The man he'd become couldn't pick up the pen. The Okafor Industries boardroom erupted in chaos when Emeka announced his decision. "You're refusing to sign the Chevron contract?" Board member Chief Adebayo leaped from his chair. "Do you understand what you're saying? This deal represents 40% of our annual revenue." "I understand perfectly," Emeka replied calmly. "I'm also terminating our Delta oil drilling projects and shutting down the Agbamoso palm oil plantation." Stunned silence filled the room. These were Okafor Industries' most profitable ventures, generating billions of naira quarterly. "Sir," his head lawyer interjected carefully, "are you feeling well? Perhaps the accident affected your judgment more than medical reports indicated." Emeka had anticipated their reaction. For 20 years, he'd built this company on ruthless exploitation of Nigeria's natural resources and political connections. His board members, shareholders, and employees expected him to prioritize profits over people's welfare. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in decades," he said. "We're going to restructure completely. Environmental remediation, community compensation, sustainable business practices." The board members exchanged worried glances. Chief Adebayo spoke for all of them. "Emeka, if you proceed with this madness, you'll destroy everything we've built. The company will collapse within 6 months. Then it deserves to collapse." Emeka left the boardroom amid angry shouting and threats of legal action. He knew they would try to have him declared mentally incompetent, remove him from leadership, and continue business as usual. But he had 4 months of memories showing him what really mattered: community, love, honest work, sleeping peacefully without guilt. He was prepared to lose his fortune to save his soul. The press conference shocked Nigeria's business community. Major newspapers, television stations, and online media packed the Okafor Industries headquarters as Emeka announced the most dramatic corporate transformation in the country's history. For 20 years, Okafor Industries has prioritized profit over people. He began, reading from notes he'd written himself. "We have destroyed communities, poisoned water sources, and displaced families for financial gain. Today that ends." He announced a 50 billion fund for environmental cleanup and community compensation. Every village affected by oil spills would receive water purification systems and alternative livelihood programs. Families displaced by palm oil plantations would be given permanent resettlement packages including land, housing, and education scholarships. "But money cannot undo the damage we've caused," he continued. "I take personal responsibility for every community destroyed, every river poisoned, every family driven from their ancestral lands in pursuit of corporate profits." The business press erupted with questions. How would he fund these reparations? What about shareholder obligations? Was this admission of guilt that would trigger lawsuits? "I don't care about shareholder profits anymore," Emeka said. "I care about leaving Nigeria better than I found it." In Mushin Market, Vendors gathered around a small television to watch their former neighbor make headlines. Adani stood at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down her face, as she watched the man she'd loved publicly confess to crimes that had destroyed her own life. She walked away before the questions began, but she'd heard enough to understand that John's transformation had been real, even if it came 4 years too late to save her husband. The board of directors moved quickly to remove Emeka from power. They filed emergency injunctions claiming mental incapacity, produced medical experts who testified that amnesia could cause permanent personality changes, and lobbied shareholders to vote for new leadership. "He's clearly suffering from traumatic brain injury," Chief Adebayo told journalists. "The man we knew would never destroy his own company out of misguided guilt." Legal battles consumed weeks as Okafor Industries' stock price collapsed and international partners canceled contracts. Environmental groups praised Emeka's confession, while business leaders called him Nigeria's greatest corporate traitor. Through it all, Emeka remained focused on his personal mission. He sold his luxury cars, his art collection, and most of his real estate to fund the compensation program. He moved from his penthouse to a modest flat in Ikeja, closer to the communities his company had damaged. Every morning, he visited a different village affected by Okafor Industries operations. He listened to stories of destroyed livelihoods, apologized personally to families, and worked with local leaders to design appropriate reparations. But the person he most needed to face still refused to see him. Adani had moved to a different market, avoiding any location where they might accidentally meet. Neighbors told him she was doing well, her business had continued growing using strategies he'd taught her, but she'd made it clear that Chief Emeka Okafor was not welcome in her life. He understood her anger completely, which made it hurt even more. Against all advice from friends and neighbors, Adani agreed to see him one evening after he'd waited outside her compound for 3 days straight. They met in the small courtyard where they'd first held hands, where he'd kissed her under stars barely visible through Lagos smog. "Why are you doing this?" she asked without preamble. "The money, the apologies, destroying your own company. Why now?" "Because I remember who I used to be, and I can't live as that man anymore." She laughed bitterly. "So your guilty conscience is worth more than my husband's life?" "No. Nothing I do will bring Tun back or undo the damage I caused. But I can't pretend I don't know how much pain I've caused, how many families I've destroyed." They sat in uncomfortable silence, watching children play football in the narrow space between buildings. This compound had been their world together, where he'd learned that happiness came from community and love rather than wealth and power. "I loved you," Adani said quietly. "The man you became here, John, I would have married him, built a life with him, but that man was built on lies." "No," Emeka said firmly. "John was the most honest I've ever been. Everything I felt for you, every moment of happiness we shared, every insight about what really matters, that was real. More real than anything in my previous life. But John doesn't exist anymore, does he? Your Chief Emeka Okafor now making headlines and grand gestures. You've returned to your world. I'm trying to build a bridge between both worlds. To use what I learned as John to fix the damage Emeka caused." Adani stood to leave. Some bridges can't be built, and some damage can't be fixed. 6 months later, Emeka had lost control of Okafor Industries completely. The board had successfully declared him mentally unfit, installed new leadership, and resumed business as usual. His personal fortune had been reduced to a fraction of its former size after funding environmental cleanup and community compensation programs. But something unprecedented had happened. His public confession had inspired other business leaders to acknowledge their own environmental crimes. A movement for corporate accountability was growing across Nigeria, forcing companies to consider social and environmental costs alongside profits. Emeka now worked as a consultant for environmental justice organizations, using his insider knowledge to help communities fight corporate exploitation. His salary was modest, his influence limited, but his work felt meaningful in ways that billionaire status never had. On a Sunday morning, he was reviewing water quality reports from the Niger Delta when his phone rang. John. Adunni's voice was tentative, using the name she'd given him during their happiest months. Adunni, his heart stopped. They hadn't spoken since that painful evening in her compound. I've been watching the news about your work. The water treatment center you built in my cousin's village. The children can drink safely now. It's the least I could do. Long silence. Then, I think I'd like to see you again. Not as Chief Emeka Okafor, but as John. The man who helped me build my business and made me remember what love felt like. Emeka closed his eyes, feeling tears he hadn't shed since the accident. John never left Adunni. He just learned to live with Emeka's memories and responsibilities. Then maybe John and I can find a way forward together. It won't be easy, and I may never fully forgive what Emeka did to my family. But John is a good man. As he prepared to meet the woman who'd saved his life in more ways than one, Emeka understood that true redemption wasn't about grand gestures or public confessions. It was about the daily choice to be better than who you were yesterday, to love more than you take, and to build rather than destroy. The masquerade was finally over. Now the real work could begin. Thank you for watching through. Hey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And while you're at it, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update.